The Stillwater Planning Commission meeting of October 21st will now come to order. It will be the process this evening to call for items on the agenda. The commission will hear briefly from staff first, then the applicant and/or their representative. Then open the public hearing and hear from those in favor and/or in opposition to the request. When you come to the podium, please clearly state your name and address for the record. And then before closing the public hearing, both staff, the applicant, and/or their representative will be provided an opportunity to respond, to provide additional information, and answer questions. After all interested parties have spoken, the public hearing will be closed, and then we will hear closing remarks and alternatives from staff. First item this evening is general orders, and we have a request for a waiver to subdivision requirements, and we shall hear from staff.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Henry Bubelheimer. I'm with Development Services. So tonight we're looking at a special exception request for 5823 North Perkins Road. This request is to alleviate the sidewalk requirement for a new residential development. Here's the property outlined in pink. This is on the east side of Perkins, south of Burris. This property is on the east side of Perkins, kind of across from the canyons, and about a quarter mile north of North Tower Park, both residential developments. Here's the street view where you can see the existing vacant property. This is from Perkins looking east. Here's the zoning map where you can see the zoning on this property, which is RSS, or small lot single family residential. To the south, it's zoned IG, or general industrial. To the east, it's zoned A, or ag. And to the west is zoned RSS for the canyons. Here's the future land use map, which does call for commercial and high-density residential at this location. I'm open to answer any questions if you have any. I will start by answering a question that was posed last week, which was about the different triggers for when a new special exception would be required. This special exception does apply for this specific building permit. So if it were to be split, another house would be built. For that building permit, a new special exception would be required. So this approval of this would just be for this house being built on this lot. If that were to change in the future, a new special request or a sidewalk would be required to be built at that time.
Okay. Thank you. That helps.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I guess, are there any questions? Yeah, any questions for staff on this other than the one that he's answered?
I think one of the other questions that we talked about, or maybe you had asked about that being a stipulation to approval, was if sidewalk is built to the adjacent properties, do they have to fill in their portion of that or not?
This applicant? No. Waiver is.
Okay.
Unless they were going to additional developments on the.
So then it sounds like the only trigger would be another permit on this property.
Correct.
Okay.
And you can, if you so wish, your motion specific that the special exception only applies to the single family residence on this tract as identified in the application. So it's very clear for the record.
So the staff's recommendation is to approve it. I'm curious why. What's the logic on the staff side?
It's a good question. We do have sidewalks going in, not on the lot to the north, but the lot north of that with that commercial development. There are sidewalks on the west side of Perkins for it because there were residential developments there that had to build the sidewalk. I think the reasons laid out in code were if it's more than 2.5 acres, building a sidewalk for that width of Perkins can be an undue burden, which I think is why the code gave the opportunity for this alleviation. Staff's recommendation is to go ahead and provide that just because that would be a burden for one single family house in an area that at this time the sidewalk wouldn't be very utilized. So although we always support connectivity and providing sidewalks, that's the reason for that recommendation.
So there is a sidewalk on the west side of Perkins there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I thought so. Thank you.
As was pointed out last time, there's not necessarily a crosswalk to get to that sidewalk, but
Any other questions for staff? At this time, we'd like to invite the applicant, if they're here, to come forward and state your position. And just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Kathy Kent. The address is 5823 North Perkins Road. We purchased this piece of property about 2 years ago in November. 3 years ago in November. We're putting a single family home towards the back of the 10-acre property, so we won't even be utilizing the front portion. And then the properties, I believe it's 30 acres to the south of the property, are undeveloped as well. Well on north all the way, I believe, until you get past Airport Road. So that side of the road isn't utilized for walking, jogging, anything like that. More of a high traffic, low density area. And there is the sidewalk possibility on the west side of the property. And then, like Henry said, that just the cost associated with that small area would be exponential for us. We do not plan on selling the property or developing the property. It's not prime location for that at this time, with the industrial on the north, and possibly if that gentleman was to sell in the south. So it's going to be for our single family, one home, 2 kids, husband area. So we would like for you to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for hearing this.
Any questions for the applicant? No. Thank you very much. Okay, so at this point, I think we'd like to just hear alternatives and findings. I think we've already discussed that a little bit, but we'll go through the procedure.
yes, ma'am. So the city code states that any new development is required to build sidewalks when located on the north or east side of the road. There's currently a sidewalk along Perkins on the west. The comprehensive plan recommends high-density uses at this location. And the alternatives are to approve, reject, or table this request. Staff recommends alternative number 1, which is to approve the special exemption for the single-family residence located on the tract of land as identified on the application.
I would say that this fits the criteria of an undue burden on a single-family residence having to build that extensive sidewalk.
I'd agree.
So if nobody else has any other thoughts on that, then I would motion to approve the special exemption for the single-family residence on the tract of land as identified on this application.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda, we'll move into public hearings, and the first item on the agenda is a request for form-based code warrant, and we shall hear from staff first.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Chair and Commissioners. Today we're looking at a form-based code area warrant for 230 North Duncan Street. Here's the area review of the property outlined in pink. This property is on the west side of Duncan, in between Matthews and Miller. Here's the street view of the existing structure on the house. This is from Duncan looking west. The applicant is proposing to build a duplex on this property. In Table 5 of Section 3.7, it lays out the allowed uses specifically for the form-based code area. This table is a little different than the table of allowed uses for the rest of the land development code. In this table, it has those uses that are allowed by right. It has those uses that aren't allowed, and those allowed with specific use permit. But specifically for the form-based code area, there's a 4th category, which is those allowed by warrant. A warrant is something that could be approved by Planning Commission. So if you guys approved it, you would be the final deciding body tonight. So that's what we're looking at tonight, is whether this location is the appropriate location for a duplex. This property is zoned, what's it called? Corridor Redevelopment Area, Transect 5. So here's the site plan of the property. we didn't do an intensive review of this site plan. Like a specific use permit site plan is required to meet all the requirements. This was just submitted conceptually. There are some things that will have to be modified on this site plan, but just this shows that the proposed duplex on the property. This shows, we don't have to get into the details of the floor plan, but it just shows one technicality that has already been addressed by the applicant. So I'll go back a slide and just show that the T5 zoning district has a 15-foot maximum setback, so it's encouraging those houses to be brought towards the street. With that maximum setback, you can't have the appropriate length for a car to be parked and stay on your property, as that parking space is generally 18 to 20 feet. So these parking spaces out front of the property could not count towards the parking if they were only that 15-foot wide, and we couldn't approve the house being further back because of that maximum setback. So this floor plan, it was just created and submitted to show how they could still meet that parking requirement. In this floor plan, they're proposing that the first floor be set back 5 foot, and the second story of the structure would overhang that 5 foot. So the second story of the structure would meet the 15-foot setback, while the first story of the structure would be set back to 20 feet to allow for the parking. So this is just an example of a problem that was seen, and the applicant made some modifications to meet that. So yeah, I'm open to answer any questions if you have any.
Do we have any information as to the intent of the form-based code? Was the intent to have this be walkable, or was there any kind of direction on that?
It doesn't explicitly say that, but I do think it was encouraged just in the way that it's written. But it's not explicitly written as like one of the goals in the code.
Okay. Do we have what some of the goals were?
We do not. It could potentially be in some of those old staff reports, so it's something I could potentially find.
Okay.
It doesn't seem intuitively obvious to me that you would have a maximum setback of 15 feet. Do you know the reason for that?
I don't know this specific reason, but on other overlays that I've worked on that were similar that had those maximum setbacks, it's to encourage that street activation, pull the front porches of the houses closer to the street so you have less of a front yard. It's more of an activated space, which also incidentally does allow the backyards to be larger.
Yeah.
But I think it's just to kind of, those downtown spaces where the houses are built right up to the property lines. It's kind of an in-between of that, where you don't have the large front yards. It's not right on the property line. It's kind of in between.
Okay. Interesting.
The reason I asked the question is to really understand why to pull forward. And is that to allow more interaction amongst the occupants and the neighbors to create more of a neighborhood feel? Really what desire is. So
is there access from an alley that they're trying to encourage parking from the rear?
So that's another reason, is to encourage parking from the rear. I do agree with Ms. Phillips. That was one of my interpretations as well, is that it would be to encourage that walkability and that street activation. My other thought process would be to encourage access from the alley for parking in the rear. This property specifically does not have an alley, so they didn't have the alley access, which is why they were getting creative. But I do think that if I were to make a guess, that would be one of the intents as well.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Well, let the applicant come forward if you'd like. And
hello, Aaron Ferguson with Bancroft Design at 923 South Lowry. So Henry covered it pretty well. Really the biggest issue was the parking and trying to get that resolved to meet and to satisfy all the requirements in the T5 district. And I think that would be the case for any house that was built there. It'd be difficult to have enough space to have a car parked on the property and not be in the right of way without violating the 15-foot setback rule. But we think that there's a good solution that's been found. But if there's any other questions, I'm here.
That would also be a requirement regardless of if this was a duplex or a single-family home.
Yes. Yeah.
It's interesting that that meets the requirement. I mean, since it's not at the ground level, that the second story can count as the setback distance.
I don't think the city code explicitly defines it as the first floor.
Yeah,
Since the
no,
second
it's not.
floor is close enough, then it qualifies.
Creative.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Sure.
Hello, I'm Dusty Lane, 1720 North Washington here in Stillwater. I'm going to be the builder, and thought if y'all guys had any specific questions on kind of the intent and the look, I'd be more than happy to try to answer those for you.
So I think my question would be, and I think that we were provided some other diagrams today. Is the intent to have some green space or some yard, something out there to allow some interaction with the neighbors?
Actually, in between the driveways, Chairman Phillips, and also on each side, there'll be opportunities for green space, landscaping, and that's the intent and the plan, is to try to green that front up all we can. And another part of the form-based code, which I happen to have been on planning commission when we adopted all of those back in the day, but it was one, the interaction, to answer your question from earlier, was to pull those buildings up to the front. Most of this, at the time, we had some really high-rise apartments, parking garages, all of that coming into the city, that as a planning commission, we kind of had to get our heads together rather quickly on that. And the thought was it would be kind of like the county administration building is there at 6th and Duck, that, you know, basically the building would try to be right up by the sidewalk with, you know, a 6 to 10 foot sidewalk. That was kind of the thought process back then. Now, obviously, it's kind of morphed as time has went along. Not everybody's building, you know, 4 or 5 story apartment buildings right now. So the other thing that was important was a mix of different, I guess, finishes on the front of the building. There's part of that is so much of it has to be translucent. You have to have so much glass. And a lot of these details will be worked out with the building department during the building permit process. But, you know, we plan on doing stone down low, stone columns up if you have that elevation where it shows the white there, and then a mixture of some siding, probably go with a garage door that has quite a bit of glass in it, just to help with that translucent requirement. Square footage wise. So anyway, there'll be different textures. I'm planning on making the upper part, the fascias, if you will, 12 inches wide as kind of a capital effect for that, which is another thing that would be, you know, that we'd like to see in T5. So there's some more particulars that you know will be handled during the building permit process. But that kind of gives you at least a feel, that elevation of kind of what our intent is with it. Currently, there's an uninhabited house on the property. And from what I understand, and I can be corrected here, but if the owner wanted to, they could just take that existing house because it would grandfather and, you know, fix it up and rent it or whatever they may do. Personally, I think this is a lot better use, one, density-wise. We have a lot more density there than we could get in a single-family home, which was the intent of T5, as well as, you know, having a new structure there. So anyway, with that, I'd take any questions if you have any.
Yeah, I don't know if more of an observation, or maybe it's a question.
Okay.
You were on when these things were adopted back when on the board, so
Uh-huh.
it just seems like the intent of that setback, at least part of it, was to not allow parking there. And so you guys have found a creative way to park there, even though maybe that's against the original intent, although I don't really have a problem with it.
Sure.
So it just
Sure.
seems like there was an intent, but smarter answer sort of overcomes the intent.
Well, and I think it's like anything, Commissioner Prather, that over time, the use is probably morphed.
Yeah.
You know, at the time on Planning Commission, we had 3 big projects coming before us, and we didn't have adequate zoning for that. And
Right.
so we were kind of playing catch-up when we went to these transects and form-based code. So we were a little behind the 8 ball on that at the time, and knowing that full well down the road it would develop how it developed, you know, at some point. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was the mindset back then.
Would you say that based on where the house is it's on Duncan,
Mm-hmm.
that it even makes sense to have? I mean, I don't know why the house couldn't be further back personally, if it weren't for the code.
I mean, honestly, it would be less problematic for me if it was set back. You know, I wouldn't have to set my first floor back 5 more feet to allow 20 feet for car parking. But I do understand that having those buildings, the closer to the street as you can, I think as Jana had mentioned, lend itself to more public interaction. Maybe, you know, neighbors talking to neighbors or something like that. So I know that was discussed back in the day.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
So at this time, I'd open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this item to please come forward. Seeing no one, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition of this item to please come forward. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and ask staff to return to present findings and alternatives.
Yes, ma'am. One technicality I'll point out just with the parking and conversations going on is that the code defines that front yard setback as the measurement from the front property line to the closest portion of the house. So it doesn't delineate whether that could be the first or second story. So that's the technicality that helps make that work. But yeah, so the findings are the land development code allows a residential 2-family use in the Transect 5 zone with a warrant. The comprehensive plan calls for medium density at this property's location. The alternatives are to approve, table, or deny this request. Staff recommends alternative number 1, which is to approve the warrant request to construct a duplex at 230 North Duncan Street.
So I do have a question for staff since we got a
Yes,
little bit
ma'am.
more information that came up. It was mentioned that the amount of glazing that would be worked out, but there's a requirement for that. So by taking alternative number 1, all of those requirements still stay in place. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. It would just be approving the use of a duplex.
Okay.
All the technicalities like the facades and stuff we haven't actually gotten into reviewing, so we don't know what changes would need to be made.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was just my clarification. Thoughts or perhaps a motion from the commissioners?
I'd make a motion to approve the warrant request to construct the duplex at 230 North Duncan Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is a map amendment, and this one has been requested to be withdrawn by the applicant. The one after this is a preliminary plat, and that has been requested to be tabled until November 4th, so we will need a motion to table to November 4th.
Motion to table the preliminary plat SUB 25-13 until the Planning Commission of November 4th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. That item is tabled till November 4th. Next item on the agenda is the regular meeting summary of October 7th.
Believe I have a correction on that.
All right.
So under, if I can find it, the meeting summary, items 6 and 7, meeting summary for review and possible action of September 9th. It has Chair Phillips abstaining and myself voting yes. I believe those should be switched. And the same thing for the next one on the regular meeting minutes of September 16th.
That would be correct. Do I hear any other corrections? Do I hear a motion to approve with corrections?
I move to approve with the corrections listed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 4 yes, 1 abstain. Next item on the agenda is miscellaneous items from staff, planning commissioners, or the city attorney for discussion and possible action. Okay, don't see anything. All right. The next regular meeting is scheduled for November 4th. And with that, the last item on the agenda is adjournment. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. We are now adjourned.